many fears are irrational. One of my biggest learnings is like there is nothing to be afraid of. And we have so much agency and control over so many things we don't realize, and so many of our fears are just very irrational. So I like to knock that one out of. I am no longer as afraid of as many things. Hi. Good morning. I also learned from Ralph this morning that it was daylight savings, and I was like, oh, that explains why I use a sleep app, and it looked like I was dead for an hour. I've never seen this setting, and I was like, I think I quit breathing for an hour last night. There was like a gap, and it all made sense. Okay, so good morning. This is a very interesting talk for me personally. This is like free therapy for the next 30 minutes. Because I stood up here 2 years ago, this exact time of year, this exact sort of weekend, and was 3 months from early retiring. And this was my first time at CampFI, my first time even being around like this type of group of people, and I mean that in a complimentary way. And it was just very interesting, and I spent my talk talking about fear. My entire talk was how afraid I was to early retire. And I was almost like doing it cathartically to, to make myself actually retire in 3 months. And so I spoke about fear. And this, that's my brother up top, and that's our 3 children. That one in the middle is related to me. And I just really want to zoom in on, this was like an actual ride in It was the log ride. It wasn't even a roller coaster. It's the log ride. It just goes straight down a hill. And that is my daughter. And fear is hereditary. I was afraid of everything. I was talking to someone earlier about this. I was afraid of lots of things in leaving. I don't know why. I think about a lot of stuff. I overanalyze stuff. I think things to death, and I was afraid of everything. And I was thinking about a photo for fear, and I was like searching stock photography, and I was like, wait a minute, I got the best photo.
That's going to be a meet.
Yeah. I kind of forgot about this. This was many years ago. I really sometimes just like to look at it. She just looks terrified. And this is the one of our daughters that is like related to me and that I birthed, and she's just, scared. But here we are, 673 days later, and she's less scared now. And I want to talk about the 8 things that I have learned over the last 673 days. Not that I'm counting. And the first one is there's nothing to be afraid of. This was her at the end of the ride, all of them, right? But particularly the one that was most afraid. And they're very happy, and they realized that there was nothing to be afraid of. And honestly, that was my biggest learning, is there were all these things I was afraid of. And look, coming to CampFI helped to assuage a lot of those fears. But I was afraid of my 2 biggest fears if I had to rank them. But I could have given you a list I think I gave a list of 20 fears last year, a lot of fears. But were the idea that I was going to regret leaving this job, and something that I had worked my whole life to get to and had, done very well at, and that was my identity, and that's who I was, and what would I be without this? And so I was afraid that I would just regret the decision and be like, I can't go back, I can't turn this back, and I've lost my identity. And I was afraid of running out of money. Both of those were pretty irrational fears, but many fears are irrational. And one of my biggest learnings is there is nothing to be afraid of. And we have so much agency and control over so many things we don't realize, and so many of our fears are just very irrational. So I like to knock that one out of. I am no longer afraid of as many things. The other learning is to be patient and kind to yourself. I remember the number of people, particularly at this event, that told me that I wasn't going to feel normal for 12 to 18 to 24 months after leaving. And if people hadn't told me that, or told us that, I would have been so in my head. I mean, I already am kind of in my head all the time, but I would have been so much more what's wrong? Why am I not just instantly happy? What am I, just all of these things. And so for me, it was really helpful to hear that piece of advice. And just to reiterate on that, the idea of like, you just need to be patient and kind to yourself. Like, it is a funky transition, right? And you feel guilt. We talked about it a little bit last night. You feel guilty in a way because you're like, well, I shouldn't be complaining about this. This is an incredible privilege. But this is a detox, right? We're shedding old programming. We are literally, I remember when I said I was retiring to someone at work, they said, are you retiring or are you rewiring? And I really like that term, rewiring. And yeah, I'm rewiring myself after, at first I was going to say 20 years because that's how long I worked in corporate America, but I had been working for 10 years before that. I mean, I had been like hustling since I was a younger kid and always had all these ideas and was doing things and was working from a very young age. And it's really hard to shift from that mindset and that culture and kind of that identity into something else in a different phase and stage of life. And it's just difficult. And one of the things someone told me too was, you're moving from everyone telling you what to do all the time and kind of setting your life for you to all of a sudden you're in charge. And that is, while it sounds amazing and it's what many of you are striving for, it still brings with it some difficulties. And so just the idea of like, this takes time, and it is incredibly normal that it takes time, especially for someone who can be in a hurry and very impatient. I had a lot, Greg and I both had a lot of feelings of what I've heard people call ennui. I'm going to butcher the French pronunciation of that, but just these feelings of listlessness and kind of, you just don't know, you don't have a lot of motivation and you're like, what's wrong with me? I used to be so motivated and driven and I had all these goals in retirement and I just don't feel like doing anything right now. And I think it is this stage of kind of deprogramming and detoxing and letting go of the old you, if you will, which is a great thing. And I heard many people tell me one day the switch will just flip. And to me, that is very true. And I couldn't tell you like the exact day, but I feel like in the last couple of months it has. And I feel much more just in a groove and starting to, figure a lot more things out. And I love this quote I saw recently from Paula Pant, or not quote, but something she said. And she was talking about, she said, I know someone who's a workaholic and loves it. He ignores his finances, saying he'll happily never retire. The reality is that work is his escape. If he stopped working, he'd have to face himself. He understands this, and so he turns to work as an avoidance play. I didn't really realize it till I left work, but work was a huge avoidance for me. I always was like, well, I'm so driven and committed, and I'm like, nope, I'm avoiding lots of other things. And I mean, two things can be true. So I just, to me, my biggest thing was just be patient and kind to yourself, because it is a transition. As much as you feel like you should just be thankful and gracious day one and magically, in your zone. The next learning was to do less. As my kids say, you're doing too much, or I'm doing the most. I get a lot of that from them. But I always loved the phrase, what got you here won't get you there. And this is there's a book titled that, which is a fantastic book, but it is a very true statement. And so when I think about, all the things that got me to be able to fire myself and retire early are what's wrong with me trying to transition into an early retirement phase. So, I became successful because I was, doing the most or, doing too much. And I kind of, reached this finish line, this thing I was striving for. And it's hard to just sort of all of a sudden like sit still and pick a new direction and figure out where you want to go next. And I was often feeling, even in early retirement, very overwhelmed and overcommitted, right? I actually, prior to retiring, committed to a number of different like formal volunteer roles and board positions and other things in my community. And I thought, I'm going to have so much free time, right? I should have like 50 plus free hours every week. And I am not sure exactly where they went, but I don't feel like I have 50 free hours every week. But I have to remind myself, just like I did at work, that I am actually, I shouldn't say just like I did at work, but in this stage of life, I actually am in complete control. Like I have agency over not doing too much, but I have caught myself, and the first year honestly was quite rough because I was doing way too much. And I just really I just sort of switched from one thing to like a lot of unpaid things. And it was too much. And I actually needed to be like a little bit more selfish, which I'll talk more about. And I literally needed to schedule in time to relax and things like that because I just wasn't. Greg watches this every day, but I'm like terrible at relaxing. I'm like, I'm going to go paint the deck, and that's my version of relaxing. And we've even scheduled in one of the things that one of our success stories, I think, is we've scheduled these like adventure days that we try to do once a week. And every other week is like a hiking one. And every other one between that is some sort of outing that we can get to before the kids get home from school that day. And this has been great because I think we found ourselves saying, oh, we have all this, quote, freedom, but we're not doing a lot of the things we could be doing. And there's a lot of things we can't do because we have kids and they're in school and all these other things, but there are also a lot of things we can do. And so we spend days where if you're from Atlanta, like we'll go walk 9 miles on the Beltline and kind of just do a progressive, lunch and have a beer and, do whatever. We'll do hikes. We just kind of get into, sometimes we invite my mom on an adventure day. But that's been something where scheduling something like that and being more thoughtful and intentional with our time has really helped. Another thing, and I've had a lot of conversations around this in the last couple days, is I have had to like curb my hustling and chasing. And because it's kind of just, it's the way I'm wired and it's the way I've been working for a long time. And it's another example of what got me here won't get me there. And I'm, type A, very driven, and I keep catching myself trying to like monetize something or having a business idea or wanting to do something. And I have to like, I see it happening all the time. It's happened here this weekend. And I have to stop myself and say like, not only do I not want to make money right now, I don't need to make money. It defeats the whole purpose of what I'm doing to push myself back into something where I'm trying to make money and I'm tied to something like that. And so I just I've had to really watch myself. And I think, Stan, in your introduction, you said something like, I'm really unimportant or something. I loved that phrase. Like, I want to be unimportant. I want to maybe be important to my kids or, someone like that looks up to me, but I don't want to accomplish anything. I'm not saying ever again in the ways I used to. I just don't want to. I'm trying to like rewire that part of my brain. I don't want to prove anything to anyone. I don't want to keep chasing things. I have enough. I am enough. I really am trying to remind myself of that daily because my MO is to like, there's a squirrel over there and I want to like chase it. And I have to remind myself like, just because I can doesn't mean I should. And to me, that is, has just been a really big learning is that I just this is me, painting my deck, which is really large and like up high and just not, and has to be hand painted and it's a long story, but it is just, I just keep I can't stop myself. I can't stop doing these things. And some of the things I enjoy like that, but there's other things where like, I don't want to monetize my podcast. It will ruin it for me. I had a long conversation with Daniel about that yesterday. And there's also been times that I'm like feeling off my game. I'm like, I used to be so much more productive and on top of things in my life. And there's so many things that I am just feeling off about and have felt off about in the last year and a half. And I need to remind myself like, that's actually okay, right? It's my game now. I can be off if I want. And I'm feeling off because of what my old life was like. And I actually feel like I'm kind of like, in many ways, I felt like I was regressing. And I was like, I like had become so good at so many things and was so on top of things. And then I'm kind of like a teenager. I like sleep in every day or like, I like get the kids off the bus and then I like go back to sleep. And I'm doing these things where I'm like, oh, what's wrong with me? And I'm like, no, this is good. I just need to, convince myself that this is okay. And around that Stan comment, this is something I just saw 2 days ago. On our way here, I was reading the Daily Stoic email from Ryan Holiday, which is one of my favorite emails. And he was talking about Marcus Aurelius and in his book Meditations, and I'm just going to kind of read the part in yellow, but being famous is empty, he tells us. Being remembered is worthless. Power is corrupting and an immense burden. Don't be fooled, he is saying to his successors of the crown. But he is also saying this to us in our own humble fields. The top spot is not what you think it is. Don't trade your life and your identity for it. Don't lie to yourself. Don't become the monster necessary to acquire and keep it. And look, I'm not knocking ambition or power or, anything. There's many people who, want it for the right reasons, and it's a great part of their life. But I think for me, I almost had to like give myself permission to say like, I used to want that and I don't anymore. And that's okay. And I want to stop chasing things. And that was an important, I think, realization for me in early retirement. Another piece is around structure and routine. And I was so excited to have all this freedom for the first time. And then I realized that I actually need some structure and routine in my life. And I like don't feel good when I, sleep in every day. It was like nice for a while. And then I was like, okay, I got to like get up and, do something before noon. And this is one of what got you here will get you there. So what made me successful at work was having some level of structure and routine, and having goals and prioritizing them. They're just all different, right? And I have way more flexibility to change things up. And so I think about this of like the things that made me successful at work actually will make me successful in early retirement. Some of them, right? Picking and choosing certain things like the structure and routine. And so I am creating a lot more kind of framework, but with a lot of flexibility within that framework. So I can remind myself that I can change things up whenever I want and however I want, but there is a lot of value in me actually like scheduling time to work out or scheduling time to go catch up with friends and having an adventure day with Greg where we make sure once a week we do something together and things like that. And it requires a lot more discipline and intentionality because otherwise just time flies and we've got 3 kids and life's busy and all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know what I did for the last, 3 months. And so I want to do more goal setting and prioritization and routine. And it is helping me as I introduce more and more of that. And someone talked about this yesterday, but there's also like decision fatigue. Oh, Stacey, you talked about it last night. It's incredibly overwhelming when you can like wake up and do whatever you want. And to wake up every day like that and be like, oh, what am I going to do today? Especially with like what's happening up here. I'm just like all over the place and what I want to do. And I'll wake up one day and poor Greg, just out of nowhere, I'll be like I can't even think of a good example, but you can probably think of some where it's like, there was no plans to paint the deck. And the next thing is I'm like, this is like a 3-week project that's starting right now with no warning and no notice. And I'm like, I don't need anything from you, but can you carry this like 50-pound bucket of paint? And then I think, a huge learning for me has been, I alluded to this earlier, but I was heavily overcommitted in the beginning. And so I took on way too much and was kind of not happy as a result and just had a lot of like resentful feelings of like, why am I went from this demanding job where I actually got paid a lot of money to all of these jobs where I'm not, sometimes I'm appreciated, sometimes I'm not, but I'm not making any money. And it's just, it was very draining. And I had to kind of like unwind myself from, certain things at like the kids' schools and other things. And to remind myself, like, I am in charge and I'm the boss. This is a really long quote, so I'm not going to read it all, but it's from this guy on Instagram that runs a mile every day for like the past 2 years and gets in an ice bath. And I don't know why I like really enjoy watching his ice bath every morning. I don't want to get in an ice bath every morning, but I love watching him get in the ice bath. I feel like I'm getting some benefits from it. I'm not sure that that's how it works, but you can kind of read this, but I'll just pick up some points at the end. And I know plenty of people that have no problem listening to someone else, but don't have the respect to meet their own expectations. It's sad that most people wake up early for work, but if it was up to them, they'd sleep the day away as a constant. But you see, some people out there do the hard things because they say so. And in the realm of becoming a better version of you are your only boss. I need reminders like this personally. And I just love this. This was actually from an Instagram reel he created, but I just need a reminder that, I am the boss and it's actually okay for me to be what I once would have called a little selfish, but it really is putting the oxygen mask on myself before other people. And so, yeah, that has been a big learning. Another huge one for me is to just be present in this phase of life. So especially when I come to an event like this, like I love hearing about Bob and Amber and how they're going to go sail around the world for a year. And I'm jealous. Like I want to do that. And I can't do that, right? Like I love my kids. We have 3 amazing kids. There they are. There's many things we can do with them. And we try to do some extended travel in the summers and other times when we can. But we're tied to Atlanta, and we're tied to the community we live in, and we're tied to the schools they live in. And we're a blended family, so we actually like literally cannot leave. And it's okay. You know, there's all these things I want to do. I want to live a nomadic life for a while, not forever necessarily, but I can do that when my kids go to college. And so I think Greg and I both have come to a really good place recently where we're like, this is our phase right now, is we have only 6 more years or 2,288 days. I'm not counting until they leave. Quite honestly, I'm actually counting the opposite. I'm reminding myself, you guys have, I was going to pull it in this presentation, but you've all seen that the Wait But Why post where that was, you know, famous a long time ago, or went, has kind of, I think a lot of people have seen it, but it shows like the amount of, if you have children, the amount of time, or you all have parents if they are still around, and the amount of time that you spent with them from like 0 to 18 was something like 96% of the time you'll like, I don't remember the stat, but it was like most of the time you'll ever spend with them again. And it now is down to like a couple of days when you add it all up or something. I mean, that's a bit exaggerative, but I really am trying to think, you know, I can do all this stuff I want to do in 6 years. That's when that 2,288 days is when our youngest kid will go off to college. And so that's the point where we will be, you know, empty nesters and can go, I want to go walk the El Camino. I want to go do all these things that we just can't do now. And I think I spent a little bit of time, you know, grieving that I can't do them versus recognizing, okay, I've got this really, I mean, look, one of the main reasons we did this was for our kids and ourselves too, but to be around and present and engaged with them. And so I really want to lean into that phase of life and recognize like that's a phase and that will pass. And I have in the grand scheme of life, like I think about how the last 6 years flew by, the next 6 years is going to fly by. And really thinking about the journey and not a destination or, you know, some future point in life. So I'm very much trying to lean into this phase of life. And I think, you know, everyone who is on wherever you're at in your journey in life, I think just being able to be present and appreciate the phase you're in right now and recognizing it's a phase and it will change and things will change around your circumstances. And then I think the final thing is just the ability to experiment and pivot. Like none of this is set in stone. You don't know what you don't know until you start trying things. I am in charge. You know, when I was back at work, it took me like months and years to experiment and pivot. And the amount of people I had to convince and the amount of PowerPoints I had to make. And I was very good at it, but it was a lot of bureaucracy and it took a long time. I can change like on a dime now. I literally can like I'm not going to keep talking about the deck project, but I did like 60% of the work and I just sort of hit a wall. And the other day I was actually prepping for this and reading some old advice from people years ago, early retirees gave us. There was something I was reading and I told Greg like the next day, I was like, I like texted a bunch of handymen we've used at our rentals. Turns out $500 will fix this. We'll finish this project that I've been dragging out for like almost a year. And I was like, I'm paying this guy $500 to finish it. And I was so happy. And just these things where I kind of just, you know, get into the way I do something and I want to do it myself. And I have this vision and just recognizing like I'm in charge. I can change this up whenever I want. And I actually, one of the, you know, beautiful things about early retirement and just the idea of FI, forget early retirement, but the idea of FI and even just a little bit of FI, right? A little bit of like what people call FU money. You have so much agency and freedom to make changes and to pivot and to try things and see if you like them and see if you don't. And I also think normalizing that it is okay to kind of feel funky about certain things and feel my feelings and kind of make adjustments as I do is also very important. And I think everyone's situation is incredibly unique. So I've heard people say, you know, they hated that, like they retired at whatever age, whether early or late, and they hated it and they were bored and all these things. I have been like the opposite of bored, but I could have anticipated that, right? I knew my personality and my interests and what I wanted to do. And so I think for everyone, it's kind of, you can do something to anticipate your situation and you can know, like, are you going to be in that category of someone who's bored and needs to sort of cultivate some different hobbies and interests and think about that in advance? Or are you going to be, overcommitted and have your hands in too many things? And so you can anticipate it to some extent, but also you just got to get in there and then experiment and pivot and change things up and adjust things as you can. And my final piece of advice to you, I can't even remember what year this was, but it was probably the last time we had snow in Atlanta, which is a long time ago, is just don't wait for retirement. So I think everyone in this room is in different phases, or listening to this is in different phases of life, and is often, so focused on getting to some destination and getting to some point. And I think there's a lot to be said for, I always love the pioneers. I don't know who, I'm sure many people have said this, but the pioneers always talk about like enjoying the journey, not focusing on the destination. And I, at times, have been very focused on the destination. And I really think even when you are working, you can be much more focused on the journey and just not waiting to live your life until you hit some goal that you're trying to meet, right? There's so much you can do in your current circumstances to enjoy your life and optimize your life, and you don't have to wait for some magical point where you all of a sudden have, reached some goal you were trying to get to. So that is what I have learned in 8 things over the last 673 days. I am happy to answer any questions or, yeah.